Go to Paul, up the side there first.
Is it like that if I have an experience and I feel like something's true in the way that, I feel like this, what I felt today was from God, that I need to back myself with that belief and hold on to that? And so next week when I'm struggling with something, I think, no, I believe, I back myself that really happened.
Yes. This is the issue many of us face, right? What happens is we have an experience, and then over time we start forgetting the experience. Now, true faith doesn't do that either, actually. Faith remembers the experience and adds it to the next experience. It is additive in nature. It doesn't take away, it doesn't divide things, it adds to them, right? And multiplies them, in fact. So this is the thing we need to understand about faith. Whenever we are not choosing to remember, right, what previous experiences of faith have brought us, we are purposefully encouraging our doubts and fears. Does everyone understand what I meant by that? Whenever you are choosing to not remember a real experience that actually occurred, you are purposefully trying to avoid that real experience. So you are purposefully acting in harmony with doubt and fear, and out of harmony with truth. So when we have real faith, we don't do that. Each experience adds to the previous one, and as long as the experiences are based on truth, it will end up with continual growth. If we're becoming stagnant, then it's already telling us, I've not got continual growth, so therefore there's something false in this belief. There's something false in the way that I'm acting or feeling that I need to discover. And prayer will help you discover it, easy enough. God's universe is already trying to expose it to you. Right? But yes, you're right, Paul. Unless you remember these things, you will often... what I see people often doing is they almost take every one of these experiences as an isolated event. Yes, is the word I'm looking for. Yeah.
And it's like developing that trust in myself.
Yes, well, that's a part of what God's trying to teach you.
Is it trust in yourself?
It's like believing that it's real for myself.
Yeah, but you will believe it's real if you had the experience.
Yeah, but I mightn't tomorrow.
That's the problem, isn't it? The problem is that we forget the experience. And we need to not forget our experiences. Yeah?
And I feel it's not really growing a faith in myself. It's growing a faith in the truth that it was exposed to me through the experience. Can you see the difference in those two
I
things?
don't know if I agree with Mary on that subject.
Yeah, go.
Because the beautiful thing about God's love and God's truth and faith is it not only causes you to trust God more, but it also finishes up causing you to trust yourself more as a creation of God. Does that make sense? So I sort of see the two not as isolated events. I see the trust in God growing, and also if this is a universal truth, then the trust in yourself will also grow. Not in an arrogant way, but rather in a recognition of all of your beautiful qualities and abilities, and you're purposefully now engaging a trust in yourself to deliver them, to give them to others. Right? So I feel that it is both things. Does that make sense?
Awesome. I'm not strong on the faith in myself, so...
So one of Mary's emotional injuries is she's not happy with herself very frequently at this point in time.
I'd like to believe, grow my faith in God and God's love, but perhaps not so much in me.
Yeah, whereas I feel you will be forced into, if you engage this everlasting process, you'll be forced into eventually accepting God's opinion of you. And what's God's opinion of you? God says, you are the most powerful and best of all of my creations. That's God's opinion of you. So eventually you'll come to the point, if you're having the same opinion of God as of yourself and of everyone else, of course, you would go, I am God's most beautiful and powerful creation. You see? So can you see that for that to occur, there has to be a growth in trust of yourself? Do you follow me?
Could I ask a clarifier on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Is that different to having a trust in my own opinions? I think that's what I was...
Very different.
Yes.
Yeah. Because as I said earlier, our opinions are completely untrustworthy. Right?
So if I go, I'm backing myself on this one and it's just an opinion, then I'm going to get in trouble. Whereas if I back myself on, hey, I had an experience that showed me something about me and God,
Yep.
then I can have faith in that. Yeah.
But the beauty even of having the opinion and holding on to an opinion is eventually, if you keep the process going, the opinion that's false will be exposed anyway. So even if you had a false opinion, sooner or later, truth will expose it as false, and eventually you're going to have to let it go. So I don't even see any problem with that, right? See, from God's perspective, we are growing eternally. So if you think about it from God's perspective, all of us right now are making mistakes. Even the most perfect of us is making a mistake from God's perspective, right? In the sense of a mistake in knowledge. But from God's perspective, mistakes are really not mistakes in knowledge, because God acknowledges that these things are just growth. From God's perspective, the real mistake is every time we act out of harmony with love. That's the real mistake. Does that make sense? The only time from God's perspective that you can really make a mistake is when you act out of harmony with love. If you have incomplete knowledge, that's immaterial from God's perspective, because God knows that all of us will forever have not enough knowledge. Right? Because if there's an infinite amount of knowledge, all of us will only have absorbed a certain finite amount at any one time. So from God's perspective, a lack of knowledge isn't your problem. From God's perspective, a lack of love is the problem. Right? And it's when we act out of harmony with love that all of God's laws are trying to get us back into harmony with love. And that is the truth of the universe. All of God's universal laws are teaching us constantly about love. Because God's trying to tell us, I don't care if you make a mistake in knowledge. You know, you might come up with some fanciful idea that's completely false. It doesn't bother me at all. Right? And it doesn't bother the universe at all, by the way, either. You don't affect the universe negatively by having this idea that's just a knowledge-based idea that's out of harmony with truth. But when you have feelings and ideas inside of you that are out of harmony with love, now the universe has a problem with you. All of God's laws are designed to bring you back into harmony with love. All of God's laws are designed to reflect the pain and suffering that you have created through your own engagement of actions that are out of harmony with love. And this is why it's very important to understand the role of love in this process. So we've talked a lot about faith, but at this point we still haven't talked much about prayer. And prayer is even more important in some ways than faith. Of course, prayer won't be engaged unless faith is engaged. So do you understand these basic qualities, if you like, or attributes of faith that will be present when true faith is present? Does everyone get those things?
Up.
Let's answer some of these questions before we break.
So if we go, Laura on this side. Yeah.
Laura on this side.
Yep.
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 And then Mon in front.
Oh, sorry. When you were saying with all of God's universe, how it pushes on the small circle of the false belief,
Yep.
in that example,
Yep.
I've gathered a lot of facts that false belief is not true, and I thought that I didn't want to let go of the false belief because what I was getting from it. But I've realised that the false belief is if that belief disappears, you said blank slate, I feel desolate annihilation.
Yeah.
And I don't know
And I think it's fantastic.
I don't...
But Laura doesn't.
Because
Laura doesn't know.
I can't get experience of what what it would be like without the belief, because I've had the belief since I was born. But I know that the belief itself is false.
But can you see how much your own personal psychological self is bound up in your beliefs? Because if you're finding it impossible to release a belief that you know is false, then it tells me that you psychologically are so attached to your belief systems that they define you. So what you're doing is you're holding on to belief systems that define you.
But that blank slate, it feels like it's like this. I'm just in an abyss of empty.
Yeah, and that's a false belief too.
And can you see what Jesus was just saying about that's because it's related to your identity? Yes. I don't feel that bit hit you.
Yeah, that bit never hit you.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Definitely related.
You don't understand how much your psychological identity is identifying with false beliefs. Now, you remember we drew this circle. This is God's universe, if you like, and He is all your creations, or we could say all of your environment's creations, which are all outside of God's universe in a way, because God's universe are all based upon truth and law and love, right? This is God's universe. This is where God created. This is where you created, right? Or you could say your parents created if you grew up in an environment. And this is all to do with false, error, and so forth. But unfortunately, many of us have become psychologically attached to that. We've become so attached to that we think giving that up is a major drama.
Well, I was saying,
And
I feel like every ounce of my will has been invested in this false belief, wanting it to be real.
I agree.
But to let it go, I don't know where else I'd be.
Well, see, if you had faith, you would let it go unhesitatingly.
And do I need the faith there before I can trust that there's developing, or there'll be a period?
Laura, stop. You haven't heard what I just said. Yeah. And this is what we do. We go, but, and all it is this psyche, if you could say, this impression that you have of yourself. A lot of people call that the ego, do they not? Right? In New Age terminology, they'd call that the ego, right? I call it the psychological, your own psychological. PSY. Impression of yourself, which is false, right? And because it's psychological in its nature, it's going to feel like you're giving up yourself when you give up this. Yeah. And this is why most people hold on and choose to use their will to hold on to false beliefs, because their false beliefs are so entwined with who they believe they are. Right? They feel that if they give that up, then themselves has to be given up. The reality is, that's not who you are. And you have no faith that that's true. Who you are belongs in this area, in God's universe, how God designed you to be. That's who you really are. And you don't have any faith in that at all. Because if you had faith in that, you'd willingly give that up instead of fight for it.
And I feel this, the reason we struggle with this a lot, even when we hear the truth, is because of this rebellion feeling that we have and the anger about feeling uncertainty, feeling psychological distress.
Or even feeling like we're being totally psychologically destroyed.
Yeah.
It in the end involves almost a destruction, not of ourselves, but of who we imagine ourselves to be.
This self-concept that we want to hold on to, that's error-based.
Yeah, that's exactly right, where I'm at.
Does that make sense? And many of us are going to have to go through this destruction because most of ourselves that we currently see as really, really good is completely out of harmony with all of God's universal laws and truth about love and faith and humility and all these other qualities.
And Laura, you said about, well, what about how do I have the faith to do the thing?
Oh,
and again, I feel it's about
experimenting
and having experience. That's the only way your faith will grow. But a lot of us, and I would include myself in this group, we just get angry about having to do it, and that makes us never experiment. You go, no, this feels uncomfortable and I don't want to, and now I'm going to be angry about it and say...
So we're all like little children going, no, I don't want to experiment.
Yes.
I might make a mistake.
It feels
Somebody might punish me.
uncomfortable.
Somebody might...
Well, I also really want to know what's on the other side first. Like, I want to know that...
I'm sorry, you do know what's on the other side first. What's on the other side is love, truth, all these beautiful things. That's what's on the other side. You've been told what's on the other side. You just do not have faith in it. Right? That's the problem. And faith in it won't come until some of this is willing to get to go. Remember, that's one of the qualities of faith. Yeah? So very important to understand that. Now, who was next? Yep, fire away.
I just wanted to ask about the love. Are you saying that, because you're talking about divine love,
Yes.
is infinite and we can receive infinitely God's love?
Yes.
Can you just hold the mic a little closer to your mouth? Because
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
it.
bit muffled, yeah.
Do I also, and you and all of us, have an infinite capacity to grow our natural love and to give love?
Well, not without divine love, no. The way God's made our soul is quite simple, and that is, here's our human soul in its original design. That is the normal way we would be, if you like. Now, we can perfect it, and that is the state that a person enters when they enter the sixth dimension, or the sixth sphere of the spirit world, VHERE. And that is our soul, if you like. Now remember, we've got two halves, so we're one half of the soul, perfected in natural love. Unfortunately, though, natural love stops there. It stagnates there. There's nothing more that you can do to grow unless you start growing divine love. Now, when you start receiving divine love, the soul gets transformed into a bigger creature. All right? Not the traditional circle that I've drawn. There you go. And it's much bigger, driven by the heart rather than the head, right? And it's a much bigger, more powerful creation, because now what's happened is God's love has entered the soul. So we're talking about divine love here. This is the physical, and this is one of the things we want to discuss with you after the break, actually. Physical divine love enters your soul and transforms it into a new being. Not a being that was of your original creation, but something now that has the ability to infinitely expand. The way God created your original soul was that it only has the ability to infinitely expand if it receives divine love. It does not have the ability to infinitely expand without receiving divine love. However, remember that natural love is not the love that comes from God, but the love that comes from you. Now, of course, if your soul is bigger and it has more divine love in it, and therefore the love inside of you is bigger, that means you have more natural love to share. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the subsequent effect of receiving the divine love.
Thank you.
Yep. And we were down to Mon next.
Just a question on experimentation. I can understand how you can experiment with prayer, and I feel like I've experimented. You do A plus B and it equals C, and if it doesn't equal C, then A or B is wrong. Oh, B's wrong. My error. But so
Now I'm getting all confused with the A's and B's now, Mon.
And what's C?
all right. So say.
Do you want to bring up an actual example?
All right. So prayer.
Yeah.
So we experiment with prayer, and I take the step of praying, and if I do receive a response from God, like an answer or a connection to God, then I know that my desire, I had a pure desire, or
And so if
or a
you
longing.
didn't receive, what would you then assume?
I'd assume that
God doesn't love you anymore.
no, or like I have an addiction, like I'm not worthy to be heard or known, or no connection. Eh?
You're always worthy.
That's
What-
her. She said, I'll assume I've got an addiction.
Yeah, but see, what you're doing is you're automatically assuming false things. Many of us do this. So when we're longing for God's love to enter us, right, and we think we're longing for God's love to enter us, and we feel like we're longing for God's love to enter us, and no love is entering us, you know what I would assume?
That I don't want it.
That I wasn't longing in the first place. That's all I would assume. Just that one thing.
Yeah.
Because I know from fact that every time I've had a sincere longing for divine love to enter my soul, it always has.
Me too, but I thought that was just like, that's why I never understand the questions. I go, yeah.
Oh, no, that wasn't really the question. That was like the prelude.
That's okay. But Can you first understand that every time you say you have a longing for divine love and it doesn't enter you, you didn't have a longing for divine love?
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean, like A plus B equals C, and I'm the problem.
No. See, why do you have to then go, I'm the problem?
All right, that's...
Why do you have to do that? Because you have been taught to blame yourself every time. The problem could be an emotion that your mummy created in you, or the problem could be an emotion your dad created in you. The problem could be an emotion you got at school. The problem could be that you were taught religious things, and that was the problem. It doesn't. Why would you say you're the problem? You're the beautiful creation of God. How can you be the problem? God doesn't see you as a problem. God sees you as a person who's imbibed all of these false beliefs and false systems. And all God's wanting us to do is go, no, the problem is not me. The problem is that I have imbibed a whole heap of things that are false. And all I've got to do here is discover what it is. Now, all of God's universal laws are already exposing it to me. They're already shining the light bulb on. Right? There's the light bulb there. Right? All the light's being shined from all of God's laws of the universe, and it's already exposing it. The only problem is I'm not seeing properly. I need to put on some glasses so I can see properly. Right? See myself properly, see what's going on. And understand that every time, the way God's designed divine love, every time you have a sincere longing for it, you will receive. Right? So the only reason why you are not receiving is because the longing is not sincere. And that's not the problem. That's something inside of you. Now, if you think of it from God's perspective, He created you this perfect being without a problem. So from His definition of you is, you are my perfect creation. You are not the problem. The problem is what's got inside of you through the creations of the universe around you and your own choices. That's the problem. And that's very different than seeing yourself as the problem. And what I see most people doing is they're still blaming themselves for their own error. Most of your error got into you by the time you were 7 years of age, and then from then on you made heaps of choices based upon that error. The only time you have made the problem is when you made the choices based on error, and you're still sometimes making them. That's the only time you're the problem. And even then, it's not you that's the problem. It's the way in which you're exercising your will that's the problem. You're exercising your will out of harmony with divine law. That's why you have the problem. It's not you that's the problem. You can be perfect and exercise your will in harmony. So the problem is not you, but it is your choices. That's the problem. And the choices are driven by what's in your heart. So what's in your heart's the problem, not you. You see? But can we continue with your question?
Yep, great. Yep. So just in that example, there's a great way of experimenting to me, and the same with prayer. But when I was reflecting on how I would experiment with God's attributes and qualities, for example,
yep,
and seeing that I don't believe that God's loving and kind in my heart, mm-hmm, but I can see intellectually that God is loving and kind by all of the beautiful creations.
Yep.
So then comparing it like that experiment, which is awesome, to, okay, God, are you loving and are you kind? And just going...
Can I just stop you again? When you said, I can feel in my heart that I don't believe God's loving and kind, you must have reasons why you don't believe God's loving and kind.
Yes, I do.
You're going to have to feel them. And the majority of us don't want to feel them. See, what we try to do is we try to jump over them with our intellect. And this is our problem. We are never going to feel God's loving and kind while we have an opposite feeling inside of our soul. Recently, I did a series of discussions, some with Luli and some with Mary, about how the soul functions. Many of you are still confused about how the soul functions. My suggestion is to look at how the soul functions, those discussions. Because the soul doesn't function in the manner you think it does. It is very selective in the manner in which it functions, because God designed it to only function a certain way. And one way is that it cannot have truth enter it while error still remains within it. Right? And you think it can. And it can't. The error is going to have to come out before the truth enters. Now, you can have a faith of what the truth is, and that is completely different to the truth actually being in your heart. Do you understand? Once the truth is in your heart, you will not need a faith in it anymore. It'll be reality to you. And the truth can't enter your heart unless the error on that particular subject has left your heart. And so I would, again, focus on the willingness to allow the error to believe. And that's humility. So what we need to do is work on humility. The willingness to let the truth leave, the error leave us so the truth can enter us.
So are you saying that if we experiment still with the error in our heart, we're not going to get accurate results from the experiment?
So ask that question again, Mike. If we experiment?
With the error, if I experiment wanting to see if God's loving, when I still have the error in my heart that God isn't, I'm not going to actually get the right answer, get a truthful result?
Well, it depends what you base your choice on. If you base your choice on the error, then you certainly aren't going to get a truthful result.
But if it's intellectual...
If you base your choice on the truth, then you will definitely get the positive result.
So if you act on the truth that you intellectually know, that will expose the error and help it leave you, and then the truth can enter you.
Yeah, but can I point out to many of you still, because we haven't covered prayer yet, there's only half of the information. And so probably what we need to do is just, it must be close to 1-ish now, is it? Yep. And what we probably need to do is have a break and then come back and talk, and this discussion may have to go on to another day. Because
tomorrow.
Not tomorrow. Not tomorrow. But because basically there's so much to discuss about prayer that interrelates with faith and the operation of divine love on your soul. And it still feels to me that many of you don't understand the operation of divine love on your soul. You're sort of expecting that you have to do all the work of getting rid of the errors. But you don't. All you have to do is get rid of the errors that stop you from receiving divine love, and God's love will get rid of the rest. Right? And this is something that many of you are still not getting. Right? So, do you want me to say that again before we stop? Yeah. All you have to do is focus on getting rid of the errors that stop you from receiving divine love. And then divine love will get rid of the rest of the error. Right? You want to say more on that?
Well, Deb just said, well, that's all of my error, and I disagree. I feel that many of us have already removed enough error that we could start receiving divine love right now.
But you haven't got rid of the blocks that stop you from stop you from receiving
the
divine love.
Excuses for not asking.
Many of you are making this excuse for not asking. I'm unworthy. That's an excuse Your belief that you're unworthy to receive divine love is completely false, and it's an excuse.
You can ask, and you might then experience some unworthy feelings, but you would stop using that feeling as an excuse.
Yeah? And we often see excuse after excuse after excuse for not praying. This is why we need to cover the next part, prayer, because we often use excuse after excuse after excuse to not pray, and then we say, oh, I haven't received divine love yet, and you ask why, and we say, oh, because I'm not this, or I haven't done that yet, or I will. No, it's not that. It's because you haven't had a sincere longing. That's the only reason why we never receive divine love, is because our longing is not sincere for it. All we need to receive divine love is a sincere longing. That's all we need. Everything else will be exposed. If you're willing, a sincere longing, and perhaps I should add one more thing, and that is a humility, a willingness to let go of the error. That's all you need. The longing for love and a willingness to let go of the error emotionally. The majority of you have not received divine love because there is no willingness to let go of the error. You just have to be willing. And you don't want to be willing. So it's like, no. You know, the tantrum goes on inside of you. I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to cry. I don't want to have to feel shamed. I don't want to have to feel sexual shame. I don't want to have to feel anger. I don't want to have to feel rage. You just don't want to have to feel. And God's saying, if you want your soul to expand, you're going to have to feel whatever is in it. Right? And we're going, no. I don't want to have to feel. And that's what stops us from allowing more love in. So we start getting a trickle of love, and all of a sudden we're in a panic. I don't want to have to feel. I don't want to have to feel. Right? God's love, in the instant that it enters our soul, will expose the error as it enters. And if you do not choose to feel in that moment, God's love can't enter you more. Because God's love is a feeling. And you're now locking up your feelings. You can't do that. And this is one of our main problems. And so we need to talk a lot about prayer and its operation.
Yeah, when you consider what's on offer, all we've got to do is just feel, and we get, infinite truth, infinite love, infinite, amazing gifts. It's funny, isn't it, that we do that? I do that. I just go, no, I don't want to feel, Yeah,
and quite often I have discussions with people and saying, like, just there, did you see just there? You went from feeling a bit of divine love and feeling some other emotion, and you started to cry, and then you shut it down. I remember just when we were down south with Paul and Mel, and we had just a bit of a discussion over some lunch, and Mel started crying. She says, no, stop. And I said, there you go, you're stopping divine love right there, right at that spot where you need to feel. That's where you're stopping it. And you're shutting it down. And so only a trickle gets in. And if a trickle gets in, how much transformation of the soul has happened? A trickle. And so 10 years later, it's still trickling. Do you want a flow or a trickle? Yeah, that's what I think anyway. I'd go for a flow. And so my feelings are, as soon as that feeling is triggered in you, let it out, let it go. Let what the divine love is exposed in you leave you. It'll leave you for good if you let it in that one experience. If you let it go, as long as it's there, it'll be gone, and you won't have to process that particular thing again if you really let it flow. But most of us don't do that. Most of us, what we do is we long for God's love because we think that it's going to be nice and love should meet all of our addictions and everything. And God, because we've got a sincere longing sometimes in that place, God gives us a bit. And all of a sudden we're starting to feel an emotion. We're starting to feel some kind of negative feeling, like grief in particular, but usually it's grief or shame or some other kind of feeling that's very, very difficult to feel. And what do? Cut it off. Don't do that. We run away, and in the process of running away, we are stopping the operation of divine love affecting our soul. Our soul cannot be transformed under those particular circumstances, and any transformation that will have to take place with your own effort. And what have we called that? We've called that the natural love path. That's the way, so most of us are still doing it that way, thinking that we're on the divine love path, but we're actually on the natural love path because we're not willing to engage emotionally the exposure of what's within. Right? We're afraid of it. We're afraid of our own emotions. Most of us, the biggest problem we have is that we're terrified of ourselves. We're terrified of what's within. And we don't want to feel it. Right? And we can't even blame ourselves for that because most of the time that terror was created by when we were little, we started crying. And what did Mum and Dad do? You stop crying, otherwise I'll give you something to cry about. Right? And now there's the threat of violence. And of course we're terrified, but God's not like that. That's one of the things we're going to have to let go of in order to receive God's love. So what we'd like to do after this break is talk to you primarily about the operation of prayer, how faith influences prayer, and also what prayer does for you, what receiving love into your soul actually does to your soul, physically does to your soul, and spiritually and emotionally does to your soul, so that you can at least have some desire to pray. All right. So let's have a break for